The night had been quiet, one of those evenings where the road stretched endlessly under the dim glow of the streetlights, and silence filled the car except for the steady hum of the engine. Our little boy, Noah, was fast asleep in the back seat, his head tilted against the window, his breath fogging up the glass. My wife, Emily, sat beside me, humming softly to herself as she flipped through the radio stations. It was peaceful, ordinary. But ordinary moments have a way of shattering in the blink of an eye. When the low fuel light flashed on the dashboard, I pulled into the nearest gas station, a lonely spot on the edge of town where the buzz of flickering fluorescent lights replaced the stars in the sky. I stepped out to pump the gas, stretching my shoulders after a long day at the construction site. Emily opened her door too, brushing her hair back as she stretched and breathed in the cool night air. She gave me that small tired smile, the one that always reminded me why I worked so hard. I had just swiped my card at the pump when the sound of screeching tires tore through the stillness. My head whipped around, and in seconds, the quiet lot was flooded with armored trucks and SUVs, red and blue lights flashing violently across the cracked pavement. Before I could even process what was happening, men in heavy tactical gear poured out, their movements sharp and military. Rifles snapped up, red laser sights cutting through the night. Hands in the air. Both of you, a booming voice roared from a megaphone. My first thought was that they must have been after someone else, maybe a dangerous criminal hiding nearby. But then one of the rifles centered directly on Emily, and in the next breath, she let out a piercing cry. I watched in horror as her body jolted violently, electricity coursing through her. The bright crackle of a taser lit up her frame before she collapsed hard onto the cold concrete. Emily! I shouted, rushing toward her, but instantly 6 red dots landed on my chest, halting me mid-step. My heart thundered, rage and fear colliding inside me as I froze with my hands raised high. Behind me, Noah's voice broke into terrified sobs, his small fists pounding against the car window as he screamed for us. Emily lay sprawled on the ground, trembling, her fingers twitching as if reaching for me. She gasped my name, her lips forming the words, "Help me," in a whisper too faint for anyone but me to hear. I wanted to lunge forward, to grab her and shield her, but every muscle in my body was pinned down by the rifles aimed at me. The flashing lights spun dizzy circles across the pavement, the men barked orders into radios, and I stood in the middle of it all, helpless. One thought echoed louder than the chaos: this wasn't a mistake. Whoever these men were, they hadn't just come for someone, they had come for her. And if I didn't figure out why, I was going to lose everything I loved in a single night. The harsh pressure of hands shoved me forward, forcing my chest against the hood of our car. The cold metal bit into my skin as someone yanked my arms behind me and snapped steel cuffs around my wrists. My breath came out in ragged bursts, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else for a moment. Through the reflection in the car window, I saw Emily on the ground, struggling to push herself up, her face pale and streaked with tears. My son's frantic cries echoed from inside the car, each one ripping through me like a knife. "What are you doing? She hasn't done anything," I shouted, my voice cracking with fury and desperation. The officer pinning me down leaned closer, his voice a low growl that I'll never forget. "You've been harboring a fugitive." The words didn't make sense. Fugitive? My mind scrambled to piece together what he meant. What? Who? I demanded, twisting my head to look at him. He didn't answer, only tightened his grip until my shoulders burned. Meanwhile, 2 other men approached Emily. One of them pulled a small handheld device from his vest and aimed it at her face. The screen glowed, scanning her features, while Emily tried to swat it away weakly, still trembling from the shock of the taser. "She's the match," the man said grimly, turning the screen so his leader could see. My stomach dropped. They weren't just attacking us randomly, this was intentional. But how could Emily, a woman who spent her days teaching kindergartners how to read, possibly be mistaken for a fugitive? I caught her wide, terrified eyes as she shook her head violently, her voice hoarse as she cried out, "I don't know what they're talking about." The leader of the SWAT team barked more codes into his radio, his tone clipped and urgent. Around us, the other men tightened their circle, weapons trained, as though Emily were some dangerous threat. Noah's sobs grew louder from the car, his small voice breaking on the word, "Mommy." I wanted to tear the cuffs apart, to rip through every one of those armored men and get to my family. Instead, I stood chained and helpless, forced to watch. My mind raced through possibilities. A mistake in their system? Someone framing her? Or was this something deeper, something I didn't yet understand? The way the leader avoided my eyes, the way they acted like they'd been waiting for her, it wasn't random. Someone, somewhere, had set this into motion. "Listen to me," I shouted, trying to steady my voice even as my throat tightened. "You've got the wrong person. My wife is a teacher, she's never broken the law in her life." The leader turned slowly, his visor reflecting the flashing lights. He stared at me for a long, tense moment before saying coldly, "Not anymore." And in that instant, I knew this wasn't about mistaken identity. This was bigger. Find a way to stop it, I was going to lose her forever. Emily whimpered as the SWAT leader pressed his heavy boot against her back, forcing her down on the cold pavement. My chest burned with helpless rage as I fought against the cuffs biting into my wrists, but the more I struggled, the deeper the steel dug into my skin. The leader barked into his radio, his tone sharp and final, "Target secured. Preparing extraction." Those words were like a knife to my gut. Extraction. They weren't planning to arrest her and take her downtown for questioning, they were going to disappear her, erase her from our lives as though she never existed. My son's cries pierced the air again, his little voice echoing through the car window. "Daddy! Mommy! Don't go!" His fear was the only thing anchoring me, the only thing keeping me from breaking down. I looked at Emily, her body trembling, her eyes wide with silent pleas for me to do something, anything. My brain raced, clawing through years of memories and secrets I had buried long before she came into my life. They thought they were in control. They thought I was just a desperate husband about to lose his wife. But there was something they didn't know, something I had sworn never to speak of again. I steadied my breathing, forcing the panic down, and when the leader crouched closer to Emily, I lifted my head and spoke in a voice that cut through the chaos like glass. "Check the database again. Now." The words came out sharp and commanding, filled with a certainty that made even me tremble inside. 5 words. Simple, deliberate, and loaded with the weight of knowledge I wasn't supposed to have. The leader froze. His hand tightened around his radio, his helmet turning toward me as though he'd just seen a ghost. Around us, the rest of the team faltered, their rifles trembling slightly as hesitation rippled through them. They were trained to act without question, but those 5 words had slipped under their armor. They knew only someone with access, someone with inside knowledge, would even know the existence of that database. Emily's gaze shot toward me, confusion flashing in her tear-filled eyes. It was the look of a woman who suddenly realized her husband had secrets she had never imagined. She whispered my name, her voice breaking, but I didn't dare look at her now. My focus was on the man in charge, the one who had to decide whether to follow his orders or confront the possibility that they'd just made a catastrophic mistake. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he lifted his boot from Emily's back. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice lower now, less commanding and more cautious. I locked eyes with him, steady and unblinking, and replied, "The man who knows this is a setup. And if you take her, every one of you will answer for it." The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the distant hum of the gas pumps and Noah's sobs. One by one, the rifles lowered, their red beams slipping off our chests. My 5 words had bought us a pause. But pauses don't last forever. The leader's silence stretched longer than I expected, his dark visor hiding eyes I could feel boring into me. Around us, the rest of the team shifted uncomfortably, weapons slack in their hands. For a moment, the entire gas station felt frozen in time, the buzzing of the overhead lights, the whimper of my son in the car, the faint wind rustling through the flags on the pump. Finally, the leader stepped closer, lowering his voice to a growl meant only for me. "You're bluffing. Nobody outside knows about that." But I wasn't bluffing. My chest rose and fell steadily as I stared back at him, letting him see that I wasn't some desperate husband lashing out in panic. Years ago, long before Emily and I met, I had worked in the shadows of a government project so secret it had no name on paper. It was an experiment in biometric manipulation, scanning millions of faces, creating false matches, planting data so an innocent person could be made to look like a wanted criminal at the push of a button. I had walked away from that life, disgusted by what we were building, but not before taking what I needed to protect myself. Somewhere safe, locked away, I had evidence that could expose everything. Evidence that would destroy men like the one standing in front of me. The leader must have seen the truth flicker in my eyes, because his posture shifted. He muttered something into his comms, a sharp code that made his men hesitate. One by one, the rifles lowered completely. Emily coughed, struggling to sit up, and I dropped to my knees beside her as much as the cuffs would allow, shielding her from their gaze. My hand brushed against her trembling fingers. "I've got you," I whispered, even though I knew the danger was far from over. The leader bent closer, his words low and venomous. "If what you're saying is true, you've just signed your family's death warrant. There are people above me who don't let problems walk away." His warning was as clear as the barrel of a gun. He waved his hand, and just like that, the SWAT team pulled back. Engines roared to life, the armored trucks disappearing into the night as quickly as they had come, leaving behind only the faint smell of burned rubber and the echoes of chaos. For a moment, the silence felt almost unreal. Emily leaned against me, her breath shaky, her body still weak from the taser. Noah cried louder, pressing his palms against the glass until I managed to force the car door open and scoop him into my arms. He clung to me with every ounce of his small strength, his face buried in my chest as if afraid I would vanish too. I looked at my wife and son, my throat tightening. We weren't safe, not anymore. Those men would be back, and the people behind them wouldn't stop until they buried the truth along with us. But as I held my family close, I made myself a promise: we would not be hunted. Not quietly. Not helplessly. They wanted us erased, but instead, we would expose them. From this night forward, we weren't just a family trying to survive, we were fugitives with the power to bring their entire house of lies crashing down. And I knew one thing for certain: the war had only just begun.